Hi and welcome. Today I want to share with you some thoughts and some ideas and inspiration around training, movement or exercise and how we can time that within our cycle, within our rhythm, within our menstrual cycle as a woman. So I'm Taryn. I am a women's health physiotherapist and feminine embodiment guide. And I work exclusively with women and predominantly with mothers. And I also have a background in being a high-level athlete as a gymnast and then after birth as a triathlete. And I first feel like a really good place to start is actually why. Why would we want to even consider our menstrual cycle and our cyclical nature as a woman as we move into training and as we move our bodies and exercise? And this is a really interesting point because it actually depends on where you are coming from, what is it that you're trying to achieve through your movement, exercise or training plan. And so as a high level athlete, there is an understanding that our training plans are going to be set up such that they work you towards a particular goal that is often coming at a particular time. So a competition, for example, something that you're actually working towards. And therefore, there needs to be a training plan that actually coincides with this point in time that you're working towards. But in saying that, it doesn't mean that it's impossible to actually embrace the power and actually capture that power of working alongside your cycle, even though you have a training cycle and perhaps like a building phase, a plateau phase and a strength phase, and then an acceleration phase and perhaps a rest phase. But we can move that alongside of our cycle so beautifully because we have this internal rhythm that is happening within us. And so the other benefits, perhaps if you're not an athlete as such, but you are a woman who wants to really honor her body and work alongside of her body, some of the benefits of actually embracing your cycle as you train and move your body is that you actually will feel energized through your movement and that you will rest when your body is actually calling for rest, and you'll find movement that will actually look like rest and actually feel more nourishing in the times of your cycle where you actually require that. And then you can embrace the power of your cycle and move with more momentum when you feel like that's internally where your rhythm is at. And so another benefit of working with this way with your body is that you don't feel so depleted, you feel more energized, and therefore you get better results through your training and also less likely to perhaps injure yourself or feel the impact of the training so much so. And it really also helps us to bring in this mindset that rest and nourishment is actually a really good and powerful thing for our body. We can be caught in this understanding or this narrative that only when we're training and moving our bodies like in a way that feels hard and fast and exhaustive, and that we get sore muscles afterwards, that we actually feel like, oh, that's when we get the results. But actually, much of the results come through the really good rest, really good nourishment alongside of challenging our body as well. So it's working out how we can do that in a way that actually honors our body and works with that internal rhythm so that we can feel good rather than feeling like we're depleting and pushing ourselves really too hard. So let's talk briefly about the menstrual cycle, the phases of the cycle, and there is this understanding that there is a 28-day cycle, which is not for all women. Not all women, and it doesn't mean that you don't have a normal cycle if you don't fall within this 28-day cycle. But when we think of the menstrual cycle, we can think of it as in 4 phases. And so in the 4 phases, we have first the menstruation phase, so lasting from day 1 to perhaps day 3, 5, 7. And then this first phase is called the follicular phase. And I like to remember that because it's the first phase, the follicular phase. And then we come around to ovulation. And ovulation depends on really this back end of the cycle, and is 14 days from that back end of the cycle. So when ovulation is on day 14, it's actually maybe not, depending on the length of your cycle. And then after ovulation, where we generally have more energy, more outward energy, we're coming back around to this luteal phase. That last phase is how I remember it, first and last half, luteal phase, and then moving then towards back into menstruation. Now, often when we talk about the menstrual cycle and how we will feel during different phases of the menstrual cycle, there's this story that during our bleed time, we'll feel more tired, we'll feel more lethargic, we'll feel more inward, we'll want to be working towards more rest and more restorative type movement. Now, actually what the research is showing and sharing with us is that so far we are seeing that some women have better strength training benefits during this follicular phase. Alongside of that, it's often a lot of women describe having what they would call a period power, this burst of energy, this increase in energy. And then also there is evidence for women to be moving their body at this phase in their cycle. If, for example, they might have endometriosis, they experience particular painful periods, it's actually showing that exercise in this phase of your cycle can be quite beneficial. But when we talk about that exercise and what's beneficial, that could be walking, it could be yoga, and then it could be a particular style of yoga. So there isn't really enough scientific evidence to tell us what is the best to be training at what phase in our cycle. But in saying that too, is that I wonder when and if the science will show us, because science is just one piece of the puzzle, and it actually only shares with us, that particular scope. But then we need to bring that into a more personalized and individual approach. And this is why often it's hard for women to really understand science, because how we feel in our body and how our hormones are within our body, and perhaps whether we have a particular underlying condition like endometriosis, for example, then how we respond and how we feel at different phases in our cycle might be very different to another woman. And this is why I always teach that when we tune into our internal rhythm and when we get to know our body for ourselves, we are really the expert in our body. And so when we are the expert in our body, we can then know from an internal knowing, this inner knowing, how would I like to move my body today, and what is the likely response that I'm going to have with that. And so there are a few different ways that you could tune into your cycle and then experiment and explore. So the first is perhaps to get to know your rhythm and your cycle. How long is your bleed phase? How long is your cycle in its entirety? And it's perhaps regularly irregular, or perhaps it's very consistent. Perhaps you feel when you're ovulating and you can start to sense into a particular energetic pattern of where you feel really outward, a bit more expressive, you have a bit more momentum, you have a bit more motivation, you have a bit of more energy to expend through movement. And when you feel a little bit more inward, where you're feeling like you need that nourishment, where you need the rest and restoration, and what movement then do you have available to you that can be reflective upon those different phases in your cycle. So what I like to teach then, or share with women, and they can explore with this, is simple practices like a body scan practice, checking in with your energy and feeling into how is it that my body would like to move today, and then what is available to me such that I can move in that way, which is when having a lot of variability and variety in what's available to you can be really beneficial. This is really about working on your inner barometer or your inner clock rather than something external to you. And so how you can do that, say for example, you work, you participate at a gym, or maybe you practice yoga in a studio. There is always this opportunity, no matter what exercise or movement that you're engaging with, for you to check in with your body and then come from a place of, I'm going to honor this and I'm going to move according to my energy, versus how is the instructor, for example, or the teacher or the trainer requesting, particularly in a group exercise setting, how are they suggesting or motivating, and what then, how can I meet myself where I'm at, rather than feeling like I have these external pressures of other people. If, for example, you're training for a particular event, it might be then that you start to really understand your rhythm, and you know when you're feeling more motivated, more outward, have a bit more energy to expend. And in that phase in your cycle, then you have your more intense training sessions, you have your longer training sessions, you have your more power-based or more difficult, what you would feel in your body calls upon more energy from you. And then at the rest phase in your cycle, you can then offer yourself some of those pure rest days, as well as perhaps those recovery sessions, so those slower recovery sessions, and know that you actually can really truly use them as recovery sessions, rather than sessions that which I used to do, is try and feel like, oh, I still have to push myself really hard, and fall into the rest and embrace that rest, and know that there is such power in the rest phase as well. This is when the muscle building actually happens, and when all of the what you're working towards can actually have a time to integrate through the body and have that real effect that you're working towards. Other ways, so going back to how might you actually tune into your cycle and feel into this rhythm, it might be that you track your cycle and then work with your rhythm. It might be that you have quite an irregular cycle, and so that it feels unsure, and that's when the tuning into the body really becomes helpful, because then you can be responsive on any given day. And then the other thing that you might like to experiment is with a really streamlined, quite structured training program, where you're doing, perhaps not on every day, but on most days, a structured program that doesn't change a lot. And then you can see, how do you respond during different phases of your cycle to this particular regime? When does it feel easier? When does it feel harder? So that then you get to know, actually, within my rhythm, during my bleed time, for example, I feel actually like I have more energy, because this is the case for some women. It's not always the case that we have lower energy and that we don't feel like we can really move our bodies in this in this really, fast way, or through cardio, or through a more strong movement practice, for example. And the last thing I want to touch on is that we need flexibility with this, because how we actually feel during different phases of our cycle can change, particularly if we have an irregular cycle, or it might just change because of the phase that we're in our life cycle, or it could be something other than our internal rhythm. Perhaps it's an external stress. We have something more that's going on in our life at a particular time. So of course, our menstrual cycle is just one rhythm that we as women are navigating and moving around. I want to share with you, this is my book, Body Conscious, A Woman's Guide to Holistic Pelvic Wellness and Feminine Embodiment. In this book, I give more in-depth detail around how to move your body with your cycle, but also a way more positive pelvic health for women. And so how we can embrace our feminine body, how we can work alongside of our cycles through pregnancy, birth, motherhood, a whole lot about movement and movement mindset, and how we approach movement as women, and how we can simply become more connected to our body, and in deeper communication with our body and deeper relationship with ourselves and our body as well. So if you wanted to check that out, you head to my website, or you can purchase this also through Amazon and take a read and a look at it there. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, you can also subscribe. I am bringing and planning to bring a lot more content to this platform, alongside a new website that I'm developing, well, actually that somebody else is developing and helping me with. So stick around. I'd love to see you, and any questions, you can be in touch. Have a great day.